Hello everyone, thank you for clicking on my first ever YouTube video during which I will explain how I became a Beatles fan because I think it's quite a funny story really to tell. Just before starting, I am not a native English speaker, so if I stutter or just that sometimes I have way too much time of reflection is just because English is not my natural language. But I just decided to make these videos in English because the Beatles community is mainly English, and so I thought that it would be easier for you guys to understand and yeah, for more accessibility, I guess. So, how did I become fan of the Beatles? I think that's for people of my age, they mostly discover the Beatles at school or because their parents or their grandparents are fan. And for me, it was a bit mix of both, I guess. So, of course, I knew the Beatles because everyone knows them, but I really learned about them in school. But at first, I hated them. So what basically happened is that I must have been around 11 or 12, and when I firstly seriously heard of the Beatles, it was because my English teacher was sick and I had a substitute who was obsessed over two things, Doctor Who and the Beatles. And so she was making her lessons based on these two things. And the first ever thing she made us watch about the Beatles was the Penny Lane video. And this video is like very cool, it's very joyful, it's funny and all. But like when you are 11 that you don't know about the Beatles and that you watch this, you don't understand anything. And then she also made us watch Strawberry Fields Forever, which is also very weird for a child. And so also I found them very ugly with the mustaches. I didn't think it suited them at all. What was really funny is that the one that I found the most ugly was Paul. And so knowing that now he's my favorite Beatle, I think that's quite ironic. But anyway, so she made us watch those two videos, and she didn't even make us watch like Paperback Writer or things like that. I don't know why. And so the first idea I had about the Beatles about is that they were just four weird guys with mustaches that I didn't like at all because it was just in the case of school. So I didn't found them really interesting at all. So here is really how I discovered the Beatles. So nothing really happened because I didn't like them. It was just something I heard about and that was it. And so several years happened and nothing about the Beatles just came back in my life until 2020. So in 2020, as we all know, the COVID appeared and we were all trapped in our homes. And so in this period of time, there was a series that was released by Netflix, which was The Queen's Gambit. And this series, I think, really changed it all for me. If you haven't watched it, I really think you should because I wasn't a fan of chess at all because it's talking about that, and it made me crazy about chess during quarantine and it gave me this occupation, so it was really great. And mostly it made me discover the atmosphere of the 60s. So the series takes place in the 60s in several countries, but mostly America, and really I fell in love instantly with like the looks, the atmosphere, but mostly the music. I had no idea like that 60s music would be so cool before, and so this series really gave me the envy of listening to more to 60s music because really the playlist during this series is like so cool, and also the looks just like I said, and yeah, everything about this series really was very amazing. And so that's why I started listening to 60s music, and you can't start listening to this type of music without listening to the Beatles. But I was like, I don't know if I should listen to them because I remembered I didn't like them at first. And so at first, the only two songs I was listening by them was like Penny Lane and Strawberry Fields, because it was the only songs that I knew from my childhood, and I didn't dare to listen anything else because I was afraid I wouldn't like them. So I was just staying in this comfort zone at first and discovering other kind of like 60s song, like with Rolling Stones and other bands like that. So this series was kind of the first step of me becoming a fan without even knowing it. But then really everything changed when I watched Get Back. So in 2021 was released the famous documentary Get Back, made by Peter Jackson, and what was really funny is that he also directed one of my favorite sagas ever, which is The Lord of the Rings. And so I was like, I like this director, and I also kind of like the Beatles, but not too much. But I wanted to know more about them. So I was like, maybe I should watch it. But it was like very long, and yeah, I didn't know really if I would watch it, but I was like, maybe I should. And so what happened, I think I will remember this evening all my life because it really changed my life. I just came down to ask something to my mother, and I was supposed just to go up back to my room because yeah, it was just something casual. And she was watching the second episode of Get Back because she had just watched the first one, and I think she was in like the middle of the second one. And so I was like, oh, maybe I will watch this, but I don't know because I don't know if I like the Beatles and all. And then she was like, I don't know if you will like it because they are kind of breaking up, and it's not like it's like there is tension, there is like very they are arguing a lot and they are not going anywhere. And because we both didn't know that much about Beatles story at the time, she just liked the Beatles, and that's why she was watching the documentary, but that was it really. And so I answered, yeah, okay, yeah, I don't know if I will watch it, I'm still thinking about it. And I just sat in the couch thinking like I'm going to go back in my room like in few minutes, I'm just watching a little bit, but I didn't get up. And so I just watched the entire thing with my mother. I was really mesmerized by the Beatles, the talent, and also the patience, because you can feel the tension in the room and how they keep their anger to themselves. This was really amazing to me. And so from Get Back, I started to listen like to the Blue album, because the Blue compilation, I think it's from 1967 to 1969 or something like that. And so I started to listen to the Beatles late era because I had been only knowing this from Get Back. And so I firstly listened to Let It Be, and then to the Blue compilation, and then I just started to listen to more of the Beatles. I really began to be obsessed with them. I was thinking always about them, about like their talent and how much their music was impacting me like nothing had ever before. And so this is really how it changed for me. And as I didn't know anything about the Beatles timeline, I just listened to the album completely randomly. I didn't know the order or something like that, so I just listened to them randomly. And I think I started after Let It Be, and after the Blue compilation, I think I started with Sgt. Pepper. And I hated it because it was much too weird for me. I didn't like weird music. The thing is that before the Beatles, I didn't listen at all to music. Like, the only kind of music I was listening to was like music from films and things like that, but that was it really. I was not really a huge music fan, and the Beatles really made me a music fan. But before, I just didn't know anything about music. And so Sgt. Pepper at first really sounded very weird for me because I wasn't used to listening to this kind of music. And so I also listened to Magical Mystery Tour that I hated, of course, because it was much too weird too for me. The White Album, I just found that it was utter chaos, which is not that wrong, but yeah, as someone who wasn't a fan, I just found it, yeah, too weird once again. And yeah, the albums I preferred at first was like mostly like Rubber Soul. This one was literally the first time I heard it, like yeah, I was like, okay, I like the Beatles, I really like them. And so I waited much longer to get back into the later albums, that then when I listened to them again, I was like, yeah, this is really good. But at first I just found them very weird. And so what is funny now is that my top three of my favorite Beatles albums are like more late era than early era, which is funny when you know what I've just said. But so in the third place there is Sgt. Pepper, then in second Rubber Soul, and then in first Abbey Road. At first, Abbey Road wasn't my favorite, but then when I really listened to the medley, it was really the thing that made Abbey Road my favorite album. But Rubber Soul remained my favorite during a very long time, and these two, Abbey Road and Rubber Soul, they're like very close from each other for my favorites. So yeah, and then after the three, I don't know really how to rank them because yeah, but so I guess that would be like Revolver or Let It Be maybe, or maybe the White Album. I don't know really in which order. Really, the thing is that I have my three favorites, and afterwards there is no ranking because it's too hard, I think, to rank them. About my favorite Beatle now, it is very obvious that it is Paul. And now that I know that it's Paul, I know that it's been Paul since the very beginning, like since the first second I saw him in Get Back. But like after I watched Get Back, I didn't want Paul to be my favorite. I don't know why. It's just that in Get Back he's so like he's being like his control freak, you know? That I was like, I don't want to like this kind of person because I didn't know like the Paul from A Hard Day's Night, for example, or I didn't know Paul like the later Paul, something like that. And so but the more I was watching and learning about him, and the more I was becoming obsessed with Paul, I just couldn't like think about anything else but him. And also I was finding it too cliche to have Paul as a favorite Beatle. I really wanted to be a George girl because I thought that it was more like being mysterious and all, but yeah, I couldn't help it. I really tried to be a George girl, but the more I was discovering about the Beatles and the more I was obsessed about Paul, which doesn't mean that I don't like George, of course, but yeah, I just couldn't help becoming a Paul girl. And so what I was talking about earlier with the Queen's Gambit, which is really funny, is that so Thomas Brody Sangster is the actor that I was talking about, who plays Benny in the Queen's Gambit, and he plays Paul McCartney in Nowhere Boy. And I think that this thing in my life, when I saw that one of my favorite actor is playing literally my favorite singer of all time, I was like, this is a sign. I can't just ignore it. And that's also why I accepted Paul as my favorite Beatle. And I won't go deeply into Nowhere Boy because it would be too long. Because I know that a lot of people think that this movie, there are the thoughts about the movie are very separated, but I think that most people find it like one of the best Beatles related movie, and I am of this opinion, but I didn't watch them all yet. And a lot of people say that Thomas doesn't look like Paul at all, which is not that wrong. I think the appearance is not like the most important thing. I think that of out of all the people who play Paul, I think he's one of the best. Maybe I'm saying this because he's one of my favorite actors, but like really when you compare to the others, sometimes they also were was way too old, and sometimes they were too much exaggerating. And so that's why, really, in my opinion, he's one of the best. Was also the one who played Paul in Modest Man, Blake Richardson. Really, his Paul was perfect, and I think that those two actors are, for now, the ones who really managed to make the best Paul. We will see with Paul Mescal for the 2028 Beatles biopic. But yeah, I think that comparing to the other Pauls, Thomas is not that bad. So, to come back to the main subject of this video, I really think that it's always very interesting to discover how the people like of my generation become fan of the Beatles. I think it's very funny always to know if they like them or not at first. And for me, when I just think about the fact that I firstly hated them, but now that like they impacted my whole life, I think it's really really funny. But yeah, these four boys really, they changed the world, and I think it's really important for all of us to keep their legacy alive. And now, for example, now that we know that anthology is going to come back and that so many things are ahead, I'm very glad to be a Beatles fan, to be able to still have Paul and Ringo around us who still tour. This is really amazing. And really, if there's one thing that I will never regret in my life, it's that I became a Beatle fan. Really, it's one of the best thing that ever happened to me, and I really can't wait to see what's ahead of all of us. And that's it. Yeah. If you're still here, thank you for having watched this video entirely. I hope it will turn out good. Don't hesitate to tell me in the comments. Also, feel free to leave your own stories about how you became fan of the Beatles and how they changed your life. Really, thank you for the support. Don't hesitate also to follow me on Instagram because I'm much more active there. And so, if you enjoyed this video, please leave a like and subscribe to have more content. And so, I'll tell you, see you next time.